They say if you die in your dream, you wake up. But I didn't. And now, I don't know if I ever really woke up at all. Because ever since that night, I see things, people who shouldn't be there. I think I'm one of them. I used to live a pretty ordinary life. Just a regular guy in his mid-20s, working a dull office job, counting down the hours until the weekend. My world was predictable, routine, almost too quiet. I wasn't the type to believe in the supernatural or get spooked by ghost stories. Sure, I'd have the occasional nightmare. Who doesn't? But they were fleeting, little glimpses of nonsense that faded with the morning light. Until that night, one dream, that's all it took. One single dream to unravel everything I thought I knew about reality. It started like the others, me wandering through some dimly lit street, empty and silent. The kind of dream where nothing really happens, but you still feel on edge, waiting for something, anything, to emerge from the dark. But this time, the silence wasn't just unsettling. It was suffocating, pressing down on me like the entire world had hit pause. The air felt heavier, as if I were walking through water, each step slower than the last. And that's when I felt it. I didn't see it at first, but I knew it was there. A shadow, lingering just beyond the edge of my vision. It wasn't like the usual shadows cast by streetlights. This one had weight to it, a presence. It moved when I moved, stopped when I stopped. Every hair on my neck stood on end, but I kept walking because, well, that's what you do in dreams, right? You go forward even when everything inside you screams to turn around. I told myself I was imagining things, but then I felt it behind me, closer, breathing down my neck. I tried to run, but my legs wouldn't cooperate. It was like I was wading through cement, and then it grabbed me. The moment its hand touched my shoulder, everything stopped, my heart, my breath, my entire existence. I was frozen, trapped in place by a force I couldn't see. I remember this sharp, ice-cold sensation spreading through my chest, like whatever it was had latched onto something deeper than flesh. I couldn't scream, couldn't move. I could only feel. When I finally woke up, I shot upright in bed, gasping for air as if I'd been underwater for hours. Sweat drenched my sheets, and my heart pounded so violently I thought it might burst. But as I sat there, trying to shake the lingering dread, something felt off. The room was too quiet. Not the peaceful, calming kind of quiet, but that eerie stillness where every creak of the house feels like it's watching you. My bedside clock read 2:10 a.m. Classic horror movie time, right? I almost laughed at how cliche it was, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. I told myself it was just a bad dream. I wanted to believe that. But as I shifted under the covers, I caught a glimpse of something out of the corner of my eye, a shape dark and unmoving, standing at the far corner of my room. I didn't turn to look. I couldn't. I stayed like that for hours, pretending to be asleep, pretending that if I ignored it, it would go away. And maybe it did. Maybe it was never really there. But as I drifted back into uneasy sleep, I swear I heard the faintest whisper in the darkness. It said my name. The next day, I couldn't shake the feeling. I told myself over and over that it was just my imagination, but the unease stuck to me like a second skin. At work, I caught myself staring at blank screens, drifting in and out of conversations. People noticed. A friend even joked, "You look like you've seen a ghost?" I laughed, but it felt hollow. That night, I almost didn't want to sleep. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the corner where I thought I saw it. I left the light on, but somehow that made it worse. The shadows seemed sharper, more defined. I swear I saw them twitch once or twice. Eventually exhaustion won. I crawled under the covers, telling myself I was being ridiculous. I closed my eyes, and there it was again. The same street, the same heavy air. But this time, I wasn't alone. The next morning, something felt off. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but there was a lingering unease that settled deep in my gut. When I stood in front of the mirror, I froze. My reflection, it seemed, wasn't entirely mine. It moved just a fraction of a second too late, or maybe a fraction too early, but it wasn't in sync with me. The subtle disconnect sent a wave of nausea through me, like my own body was betraying me. I tried to shake it off, attributing it to lack of sleep or the lingering effects of a stressful week. But then, I started noticing them. At first, I convinced myself I was just overworked, my mind playing tricks on me. But the more I observed, the clearer it became. There were people everywhere. On the subway, drifting like shadows among the crowd, staring without expression. Outside my apartment, standing too still, too quiet. At work, their gazes fixed on me with an unnerving intensity, as though they knew something I didn't. They weren't doing anything. They weren't even moving. Just staring. And the longer I looked, the more I wondered, were they watching me? Or was I just imagining it? At first, they blended in, indistinguishable from anyone else. But the longer I looked, the more the details stood out, details that didn't belong. The man on the subway, his eyes empty and hollow, as though he'd seen too much and had forgotten how to look away. The woman at the coffee shop, whose neck seemed to twist at an unnatural angle, like a puppet strung wrong. They were subtle, these oddities, but they were there, quietly unsettling, always lingering just at the edge of my vision. I tried my best to ignore them, to convince myself it was all exhaustion playing tricks on my mind. But no matter how hard I tried, they wouldn't go away. Every day, there was someone new, someone who didn't quite fit, someone who didn't belong. Their presence became a weight I couldn't shake off, pressing on me until it felt like I was suffocating. And then one night it happened. I was sitting in my living room, alone, the faint hum of city sounds filtering through the window. That's when I saw her, standing perfectly still in the corner of the room. A woman. But not like any woman I'd ever seen. Her eyes shattered, broken pieces of glass where her pupils should have been, reflecting nothing but emptiness. She didn't move. She didn't speak. She just stood there, a silent, watching presence. Her gaze felt heavy, like it was pulling me in, like she knew something I didn't, something I was terrified to learn. It was around midnight when the feeling crept back, slow, cold, and suffocating. I woke with a start, heart racing, my breath caught in my throat. There at the foot of my bed stood a man. His face, no, it wasn't a face anymore. It was burned, the skin blackened and peeling, as though he'd been through something that should have killed him, but hadn't. His clothes were singed, the fabric hanging in tatters, as if he had been caught in some terrible fire. The air around him seemed to shimmer with heat, even though the room was freezing. I froze, my mind screaming for me to move, but my body wouldn't listen. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He just stared at me, his eyes wide, his breath ragged and heavy, as if he were struggling to hold himself together. I could feel his gaze like a physical weight, pressing down on me, suffocating me. Panic surged through me, and suddenly, I was scrambling out of bed, my legs trembling beneath me. I ran out of the room, slamming the door shut behind me, heart pounding in my chest. I leaned against the door, trying to steady my breath, trying to make sense of what had just happened. But when I finally gathered the courage to open the door again, he was gone. Just like that. Vanished. Yet, the smell of smoke lingered in the air, thick and acrid, clinging to the room like a reminder that whatever this was, it was real, and it wasn't done with me. Desperation drove me to seek answers, so I went to a therapist, hoping they could make sense of the madness. They told me it was stress, maybe a hallucination brought on by exhaustion. But how do you explain the cold spots that followed me everywhere, like a chill that clung to my skin no matter how warm the room? Or the bruises on my arms, dark, angry marks I couldn't remember getting? They couldn't be explained away as simple fatigue. So, I started digging. I searched for something, anything, that might shed light on what was happening to me. That's when I found it. A news article about a man who had died in his sleep the same night I had that dream. The photo of him, the one they'd included with the story, it looked just like me. I stared at it, heart racing, a cold feeling crawling up my spine. The resemblance was undeniable. I couldn't ignore it any longer. That dream, it wasn't just a dream. The moment the shadow grabbed me, I didn't wake up. Not really. I hadn't. Reality began to fracture. I'd wake up in different parts of my apartment, disoriented and confused, with no memory of how I got there. Once, I tried to reach out, calling a friend for help. But when the line went dead, I heard something else. My own voice, soft and eerie, whispering through the static. Stop looking. One night, I was alone, too exhausted to think, when there was a knock at the door. Hesitant, I crept to the peephole and froze. There, standing in the hallway, was me, the other me. His expression was vacant, blank. He didn't move, didn't speak, just stared at me with those cold, empty eyes. I didn't open the door. I didn't breathe. I couldn't. And then, just as quietly as he had appeared, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows of the hallway. That was it. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to know the truth. So, I retraced the steps from my dream, walking the same dimly lit street, standing at the same crosswalk. And there it was, waiting for me again, the shadow. But this time, it didn't attack. It simply extended its hand, and for the first time I understood. I hadn't survived that dream. I was living in between worlds, caught in some twisted limbo, alive enough to walk among the living, dead enough to see the dead. I was neither here nor there. I looked at my reflection one last time, feeling the weight of it all pressing down on me. It stared back, but this time it smiled. And as I turned away, I swore I saw it stay behind, its eyes following me, still watching. Now, I see them everywhere I go. The shadows, the whispers, the people who aren't really people. And with each passing day, I feel myself slipping further, deeper into the void. Maybe it's time to stop running. Maybe it's time to join them.
If you felt that chilling presence while watching, don't face the next one alone. Subscribe now, the next story might be watching you already.